In this video, we'll talk about part one of Full Metal Jacket, the final scenes of part one. So we'll look more specifically at the transformation that these young men have undergone in their basic training for the Marine Corps. And we'll look at how specifically Private Pyle has sort of experiences a mental breakdown at the end of part one. So we'll look more closely at that scene. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about for this video. So by the end of their basic training, these young men have gone from civilian life to becoming Marines. And that process is, a transformation into killers. So these men have sort of adopted a kind of violent masculinity that has turned them from, gentle civilian type of people into sort of hardened, tough killing machines who are going to sort of carry out this kind of westernized or American agenda in Vietnam. So they have sort of, the military system has succeeded in breaking down, rebuilding these young men as killers. And, that quotation, born again hard, is sort of tells us the process by which these young men are sort of broken down, stripped down into nothing, treated as if they are sort of subhuman. They're not even men anymore, and then built up as something new, as Marines, as killers. And it's a process whereby they sort of lose the part of themselves which shows gentleness or compassion or kindness, and it's a very sort of cold, ruthless kind of killer who is reborn in this process of basic training. So we have, and they're assigned their roles on graduation day. Joker, we learn, is a military journalist, so he's going to be sort of writing for the Marine Corps newsletter. So that's his assignment when he is shipped off to Vietnam. Cowboy, his friend, is going to be an infantry soldier, so he's going to be right there on the battlefield. And Pyle, which is a little bit of a shock that he graduated after all of that sort of obstacles that he faced, overcoming physical and mental obstacles. He is also assigned to be part of the infantry soldier. So each man has graduated, and on the surface, this is a successful graduation day, as these men are now Marines. But this situation sort of spirals out of their control when we have Private Pyle suffering a mental breakdown, or in another way, he suffers a kind of realization of the reality of the situation. It's almost like a moment of clarity and a moment of madness at the same time. So the final scenes of part one, the end of their basic training, ends with Private Pyle. He's received his graduation, so he actually succeeded in that process of becoming a Marine. However, at the end of his graduation, he suffers this kind of mental breakdown. So he is apparently, psychologically broken from this experience of his military training, and he has been completely transformed as a person. So he went from being that kind of goofy, kind of innocent, boyish, kind of a country bumpkin, to what we see when he's in the bathroom stalls, very kind of broken, psychologically shattered, um, hard, murderous, malevolent, sinister. You can tell, his smile, just the way he looks is a lot sort of harder, colder, scarier than when it started. So he has been completely sort of transformed as a person. He's been turned into a killer. And so you can't really be surprised that he turns his weapon on Hartman, Sergeant Hartman, who has sort of brutalized him, insulted him, stripped him of his humanity, of his innocence, and just, treated him like a piece of garbage. Um, so he turns his weapon on both Sergeant Hartman and on himself. For a moment there, we also believe that, Pyle might even shoot Joker. So in a way, Joker has also turned on him. Joker participated in that beating, that brutal physical beating of Pyle, when the men sort of took their bars of soap and wrapped it in towels and beat him until he was sort of crying and begging for them to stop. So Joker has also kind of been broken by this system. He is no longer kind of, young or innocent. He's no longer even an independent kind of thinker that he prided himself on at the beginning. He sort of had that humorous edge to him that kind of kept him critically distant from the rest of this process of indoctrination. But we see him, conforming, becoming a killer himself. That killer instinct has sort of set in, and conformity to this very sort of male-dominated hierarchy is apparent. So Joker is a part of that. And I thought this was an interesting scene just because the phrasing, I am in a world of shit, is what Pyle says. He's in the toilet, the bathroom, when he's sort of having this moment of mental, psychological breakdown. So it kind of reminded me a little bit of, Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, that idea of, excrement, shit, being a kind of metaphor for this experience. It becomes, this idea that, it is a waste of these young lives, and you're surrounded literally by human waste in the bathroom. So there is that kind of metaphorical quality to that line. And I think it is sort of a moment of clarity for Pyle, and he realizes, that the world he's been sort of accepted into is almost like a hell on earth, right? It is a shitty place to be, basically. So his shooting of Sergeant Hartman and then shooting of himself is a very sort of violent end to his character, and it was, I remember the first time I saw the film, it was very shocking because there's a lot of sort of humor, dark humor in that first section where you're almost laughing at, the treatment of the men, and then this scene is so sort of powerful and shocking and graphic and pretty gory as well, to see somebody actually take their life. But so it does speak to the sort of psychological trauma or psychological pressure that these young men face in trying to conform to a system that dehumanizes them and turns them, treats them as if, their lives don't really matter. So they can live or die, but the system keeps on going. So there's sort of this element of, self-denial or self-punishment as well, I guess. So the suicide is very sort of a symbolic death for Joker as well. It's maybe a little bit of a death of his innocence in seeing a man shoot himself right in front of his eyes. So this won't be the first death that he experiences, but on his way to Vietnam, it's kind of a stark, uh, symbolic moment when that sense of boyhood, innocence is sort of gone. And just in terms of sort of the visual quality of Kubrick's directing, you do get that strong visual of these two young men in the bathroom, very sort of institutionalized, white everywhere, white tiles. They're in their white t-shirts, white shorts. So white walls everywhere, kind of like an insane asylum as well, or very sort of medically austere, institutional walls, white walls. And then the splattering of the red blood against that wall, that tiled white wall. Um, a very sort of graphic image, a gory image as well of a loss of innocence, and sort of it's a bit of foreshadowing as well for all the blood that's going to be shed um, as they sort of become soldiers, Marines, and are shipped overseas. So that's what we get, I think, the end of part one. So we also got the title, Full Metal Jacket. So that line is used by Pyle when he's loading his weapon. His weapon is fully loaded, and that's a full metal jacket. So there's a little bit of significance with the title there. And then the idea here is like the men have become weapons themselves, I think. So they've succeeded to break down these young men and turn them into killing machines. And they can't be surprised then that their training has sort of transformed Pyle, somebody who is sort of psychologically vulnerable, who has been beaten down and treated, as, subhuman, so completely dehumanized, and picked on, bullied by the other men, that he's transformed into a killer. So this process has succeeded, and in a way it has sort of shattered as well. So Hartman's death kind of marks this end of, or challenge or breakdown of hegemonic masculinity, and showing sort of the fault lines or problems of this kind of patriarchal military system, that it can result in violence, murderers, uncontrollable killers. So in a way, the Marines are breeding killers, and it's sort of ironic that one of their own turns against the system and kills Hartman, who has taught him to become what he is. So it's sort of ironic as well. So this is Kubrick's kind of critique or commentary on how this system breeds killers, and he's kind of breaking apart or challenging that patriarchal military institution by saying, it's doing something very destructive and harmful by turning innocent young men into killing machines. Okay, so that's the end of part one. We'll move on to part two of the film. So the men are now in Vietnam.